Ready? If you're in the cattle business, at least in the cow-calf business, you understand that the most expensive time of year is winter. Because typically, to get cattle through the winter, we have to feed hay or silage because we don't have enough green quality grazing to sustain them. I'm going to tell you a way that you can winter cattle for free. If you're interested, keep listening. So, why do I say winter cattle for free? It's because we're using the byproducts of other operations in order to provide our feed. Now over here we have green wheat. Now if you're growing wheat for grain anyway, the wheat pasture is essentially a byproduct of that grain operation. You can consider it a free resource. Wheat pasture, here we are, it's April 1st, so we've got green wheat here, but as you can see, very high quality, high in protein, but there's just not much volume here. If we were to turn cattle out here, it would take a bunch of acres in order to carry a cow herd, and they wouldn't be able to stay out here very long. Now, in contrast, we have regrowth of native grass. If you manage native grass appropriately in the summertime, you will graze less than half, really less than about 40% of the summer's growth should be grazed in the summertime. If you graze too much, you greatly reduce the productivity. Unfortunately, that's about the status quo. The status quo of grazing management is overgrazing. So if you graze properly, you're taking less than 40%. Why don't people do that? They say, well, I don't want to waste grass. You're not wasting grass. If you eat too much of this in the summertime, you are not catching sunlight. You are not using the free resource that we're given. So, in order to graze this properly, less than 40% removal in the summer. That means there's 60% of the biomass still standing in the wintertime. Now, some places, if you have all this biomass standing on top of your grass stand, this is going to shade out your new growth. It's important to remove this before next year's growth begins, because you need the new tillers able to access sunlight. Oh, one thing we recommend is throwing a match in and burning this off, which always to me seemed like a bit of a waste, because this material has, as you can see, it's extremely abundant. 60% of the year's growth is still here if we grazed properly. This stuff, very abundant, but almost zero protein. Now you can use this in the wintertime by hauling those animals protein supplement. Or, if it's adjacent to the green wheat, like we just were in, you can leverage that green wheat, which is high in protein, high in quality, but insufficient quantity, and take this material that's high in quantity, but insufficient in quality. Blend the best of two together. Now, it takes about a pound of supplemental protein per cow per day to make use of this material, which would be about 5 or 6 pounds of that 20 some percent protein wheat pasture would be sufficient to allow the rumen microbes enough protein to digest this material and keep those cows happy. Now you could say, well, I'll just turn them out there. They're going to go out and eat 5 pounds, come back and fill up on this stuff. It's not the way it works. Cows would prefer to eat that nice green stuff until it's gone. They come over here and then they expect you to haul them protein when they're out of all the good green. So how can you logistically manage to use that protein as a supplement to this dormant grass. The secret is something called time limit grazing. Time limit grazing, those cows want to eat about 30 pounds of material a day. If you let them out there, they're not going to eat 5 or 6 pounds of that green wheat. They're going to eat 30 pounds of green wheat if you leave them out there all day long. And they'll do that until it's gone. So time limit grazing, you use time restriction. In other words, you allow the animals out there only long enough to meet your goals. Another secret that makes this time limit grazing work is that when ruminant animals eat excess protein, that protein will cycle in their system through becomes urea in their blood, moves into their saliva, goes back into the rumen, and allows those rumen microbes to keep synthesizing protein out of that urea from the previous day's protein. And that cycle lasts really about 3 days. So you don't need to supplement protein every single day. Research has found it's actually better to do it every 3rd day, because if you do it every day, the animals are waiting at the gate wanting you to give them a handout. So when you're doing this time limit grazing, the animals want to eat 15 pounds in the morning, 15 pounds in the evening. What you do is you allow them to eat 15 pounds of green growth in the morning every 3rd day. That's, if you do the math, that's equivalent to about 5 pounds per day of protein supplementation, which is plenty to give them all the rumen microbes, all the nitrogen that they need to synthesize protein and digest this low quality roughage. So if you take some wheat pasture that would otherwise provide about 2 weeks of feed, and it's only 1/6 of the ration, now all of a sudden you can provide winter feed for 12 weeks with the same amount of material that you already have on hand. You don't have to spend an additional extra dime to purchase feed. All you do is open and shut gates. And the way you can manage, now you can be there physically to open it up in the morning, and what makes this tick is you have to have your water source in the native grass pasture. Now it doesn't have to be native grass. This can also be corn stalks or sorghum stalks or any other low quality feed stuff in the winter, and use a winter cereal. It doesn't need to be wheat. It can be rye that's being used as a cover crop. It can be alfalfa after frost in the fall. There's a lot of different options. You can use this same concept all different kinds of ways. So you can be there present in the morning, every 3rd day, open the gate, and then when they go back into water, you shut the gate behind them. Or you can use something called a fish trap gate that does the work for you. What a fish trap gate is, if you're familiar with how a fish trap works, like a minnow trap works, you have an inverted cone or a funnel shape. The animals move through it and then can't find their way back through the narrow opening. So if you have your fish trap gate leading from the green material back into, you can envision this, back into the native grass, the dormant material, you open this gate, let the animals through, close it behind them. And then when they want to get back into water, there's a funnel here that they move through, but they can't get back down that alleyway because they don't have depth perception. Because their eyes are on the side of their head, they don't have binocular vision like we do. They cannot find their way down that alleyway. To our eyes, it's like, why don't they just walk back down the alleyway and get back onto the good stuff? They can't do that. So when you combine the attributes of the high protein forage with the low protein but abundant dormant native grass or corn stalks, you can use this same concept with all kinds of materials to dramatically reduce your cost of wintering cattle.